And there are some absolute crackers in here. One that jumps off the page straight away is my fellow Scotsman Sandy Lyle back in 1989 served up Haggis, Neaps and Tatties. Legend. What a legend. One of the worst, if not the worst, was Nick Faldo in 1997. Fish and chips and tomato soup. Get out of here. Take his green jacket off him now. Like, that's just outrageous. So we're back. Me and Jackie Mack, we're back. We're back in the house. I've never said we're in the house. That's probably so uncool of me to say that. But I've said it now, so it's going to stay. So here we are. We're back for another episode of Golf Buddies Aloud. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you here. We just closed out season 3 of the Golf Yourself Healthy podcast just the beginning of this week. So we're recording this on the eve of the Masters 2025. So what's this, Jack? Where are we today? Wednesday, the 9th of April. Looking forward to the Masters?
I am, and I want to give a special shout out. Today is the birthday of one of my favorite golfers of all time, Severino Ballesteros. It's his birthday, and he has a tremendous Masters track record. I've been watching some of his old videos recently, and I am incredibly excited about this week and plan to be firmly sat in front of the TV for about 8 hours a day, every day.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. I've, as I'm sure you have as well, on your social media feed, seen plenty of Masters-themed content. I think that's what the algorithm is going to reward this week, which is shamelessly why I'm sat here now talking about the Masters for SEO purposes. So
you gotta play into it.
No. Genuinely, I think it's one of my favorite times of the year in the golfing calendar. It's kind of somewhat unusual for me this year not to be playing golf at the same time as watching the Masters, because I think I've said to you before, and I've talked about in this podcast before, over previous years, I've tended to, this weekend of the Masters has often coincided with this Ryder Cup themed event that me and my buddies would do. And that's kind of it's been sunsetted now, that particular format, much to my dismay, because I didn't feel, it was one of those things where it was like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they've tried to fix it by doing like an individual Stableford 3-day thing in September. But anyway, few things I wanted us to talk about here today. I think I'm going to start just by, like I said, reflecting on the closing out of season 3 of the GYH podcast and what's to come, and what you, our listeners, our community members and followers can expect over the next few coming months. Then I will lead us into talking a bit about the 3rd International Congress on Golf and Health, which I attended in Edinburgh. Appreciate that you, Jack, and a number of you listening will have already read my my article that I published in the GYH Substack about that. However, some of you may not have. So if you haven't, the link for the Substack is in the show notes. So again, if you want to sort of consume it that way and or just build on what we're going to talk about here today, take a look there. And we'll round out today's pod with the question on everyone's lips. Well, in fact, it probably isn't, because I dare say a lot of people doing golf podcasts talking about the Masters will be talking about lots of things in relation to the Masters, but they won't be asking the question, Jack, which is, what is the healthiest Masters Champions Dinner ever served? Because we are a health podcast, aren't we? So that is my... no, it's not even tenuous. This is a fun feature, so I'm really looking forward. I've done my research.
Okay, nice.
ChatGPT has helped me a little bit with this as well, but I've also done it myself, the good old-fashioned way. So I look forward to getting to that. So, first of all, Season 3 of the GYH podcast finished on Monday, the 7th of April. We released our 6th and final episode of Season 3, which was around golf and physiotherapy. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that already, please do. Again, via Substack, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. I think Jack and I were just discussing before we went on air that one of the main things I wanted to announce here and for you listeners to expect is that we're going to allow a bit of a breather in terms and planning time for season 4, because there will be one. But I think realistically, I think June at the earliest, I think is when we might start with season 4. I will say already, I've already got guests for season 4 in the bag, dates in the diary, and I am really excited to say, sorry, that sounds like one of those LinkedIn announcements we were talking about earlier, Jack, doesn't it? I'm delighted to announce that I have aligned it, but
I'll let you know if you veer into LinkedIn territory.
yeah, exactly. But no, I've lined up some really great guests for season 4, many of whom are people that I met at the International Golf and Health Congress, thought leaders on golf health and well-being. So we've got some great content in store for you there. But in between now and then, Jack and I are going to keep up the great work that we're already doing with the GBA episodes. And actually, with that, Jack, shall we get to now talking about some of our episode ideas? Because I think I said to you before, what I think might be better for you and I to do is let's pivot away a little bit from the whole like diving deeper on previous GYH podcast episodes, and let's have a theme. Because this week's theme for you and I is the healthiest Masters Champions Dinner ever served. But actually, I've got a list here of topics that I think I'd like us to chat about. Do you want me to start? And then you can come up with your... I've got my pen and paper here, good old-fashioned way. So some themes that I think you and I should talk about in the GBA format are handicaps. Okay. Now, when I say handicaps, what I'm thinking here is I was doing some research earlier around since the world handicap system has evolved and it has taken us into a place where people can have men and women. I learned the other day, both genders can have a maximum of a 54 handicap now.
Wow.
Did you know that?
No, I always thought it was 36 for some reason.
It was. Mm-hmm. It was, apparently, and then it's been revised up to 54 for both, is what I've been given to understand. And essentially, the reason I want to get into that subject is just because, there's a part of our audience, Jack, at Golf Yourself Healthy, who we talk to, who I think are maybe newer to golf, or they're perhaps, or put it this way, I care a lot about people getting into golf for the first time, but also I spent a long time at a high handicap when I was new to golf, and I know what it feels like to, I've talked about imposter syndrome before and like kind of all that sort of stuff. So I almost want to get into, and that research paper I sent you earlier today actually breaks down some of the themes around if you are a certain level of golfer, let's say, then you think about golf in this way. Whereas if you are this level of golfer, you think about golf in this way, or you think about yourself in this way. So I almost want to sort of lift the hood on, like, again, across the spectrum of playing standards, using handicap as kind of like a proxy for that. Like, what is some of the data? What's the research? What's our community telling us? Like, what are our listeners saying around how they feel about their playing standard and their handicap and that sort of stuff? So that's one of them. I've got another one, which is work from home golf. All right. Now, since COVID, and I just read an article earlier on golfbusinessnews.com that says that there was a BBC documentary here in the UK back at the beginning of this year, which focused on the societal changes of flexible working and its impact on lifestyles. And basically, there is a increase in, this article is suggesting, and I've heard this over the last year or so, a number of golf clubs here in the UK are seeing a surge in people who work remotely, pitching up in the clubhouse, turning on their laptop, doing a day's work there, and then nipping out for a 9 holes or something like that.
Guilty as charged, yeah.
Are you guilty, though? Is there even a crime? Are you even committing a crime? That's the question.
That's balance as far as I'm concerned.
There we go. So you get me. That needs to be discussed on this podcast in future. Dogs. dogs in golf, dogs on golf courses, dogs being allowed on golf courses. Full stop.
That could
Say no
not
more.
be. As my dog is sitting right underneath me right now, and she's an absolute maniac, and I'm dying to take her with me on the
Right.
golf course. I can't wait to have that discussion.
And then resiliently building a golf brand, which is the one that you and I just talked about before we came on air. There are a multitude of others, I'm sure, that are whirring around somewhere in my brain, which haven't quite made it to paper yet. How about you? Have you got any things that you'd like us to talk about in the future?
Yeah, I was thinking when you mentioned it earlier, kind of what would be a good one. And I think there's one that springs to mind immediately, which is something I'm oddly passionate about, I would say, which is walking while golfing.
Mm.
I find myself, it's very, very hard for me now to play golf in a golf cart. I find it to be an entirely different experience and not one that has the same benefits that I find from walking. And I think, as you were mentioning, for newer people getting into the game, there's a lot of hesitancy around if you're new to the game or you're one of those higher handicap players. I don't want to walk because I'm going to be looking for my ball and it's not going to be
Mm-hmm.
as easy. And I think there's maybe some helpful tips that we can provide that can allow somebody who is newer to still be able to walk and enjoy it and get all the benefits from it. Because, as far as I'm concerned, no matter how poorly I play, if I walk my 18 holes, I've had a productive and successful day, which is just such a nice foundation and starting point. So, I would love to talk about that a little bit, I think.
Okay, well, I would love to do that. And just as you would, I've just written that down. Whilst you were mentioning that, it reminded me that, so unfortunately, I missed this session at the Congress because in the end, I was only actually able to attend day one of the two. However, on day two, a guy called Graham Close spoke. Graham is I'm just looking at the speaker profiles here. So, amongst other roles that he occupies, so he was the head of sport nutrition for England Rugby,
Wow.
as well as the DP World Tour. And he delivered a session on the Tuesday, which was entitled Golf Carts, question mark, advantage or no advantage?
I would say disadvantage, not even no advantage.
Well, I don't know because I wasn't there. So we're gonna have to get him. We're gonna have to get him on the pod. I think. So that sounds good. We'll definitely get to that topic at some point. That's probably a good segue then into talking about the Golf and Health Congress. So ultimately, like I say, the way things worked out, I was only able to go to day one of the 2 days, which actually was fine because if you look at the agenda for the 2-day event, the overall event was a blend of topics that roll up into the overall overarching subject of golf and health. So again, if you look at health through the 3 pillars of physical, mental, social, and again, within each of those 3 pillars, you add a variety of content, let's say, that would be talking about that through the lens of different demographics, if you like. So the general public and the elite side of the game. So as you'll read in the Substack article, again, link in the show notes if you want to read that, I talked about how day one, keynote one, first speaker up on the podium on the day was Catherine Calderwood, who's the former Chief Medical Officer for Scotland, making the case for how golf can help essentially with the national health crisis because 66% of the adult population of Scotland are either overweight or obese. I should say that I am in that overweight category because my body mass index is over 25. But anyway, got to play more golf, Jack. That's the problem, evidently. I ain't playing enough golf, right?
Walk when you do it.
Yes, exactly. But I think, so if I cut to the chase, there are a few headlines that I wanted to share with you and the listener, right? And I think one of them is the reason why Professor Andrew Murray invited me, and he said it when he introduced me as a speaker on the day, was because he said, for as much as this group of people in this audience are doing excellent work around the academic research, scientific research, clinical side of golf and health, because a lot of the people in there are like I say, they're academics or healthcare practitioners. What we don't always get enough of or hear enough of or see enough of are real life stories, essentially. So with that introduction, which is I really appreciated, I was able to get up in front of that room and tell a very emotive story, obviously. And I think it's funny because in the, so I was speaking around lunchtime on the Monday, and for the first couple of hours of the Congress, I was really dialed into every keynote I was hearing and writing copious amounts of notes in my notepad. And then after the coffee break, within about an hour of my session, that's when the nerves kicked in. And all of a sudden, I wasn't taking anything in. And I was just like, I was present in the room, but like I was just freaking out a little bit. Yeah, so one of the things I was going to say is getting up on that platform and telling the GYH story, but also telling Innes's story. That's the part in particular that gave me a bit of angst, if that's the word, just because again it's hard, right? Getting up there and reliving that trauma and that grief. But I did it, and what I would say is the response that I received with multiple people coming up to me afterwards, a couple of people from the RNA, a couple of other, thought leaders, just human beings. It doesn't matter who they work for or where they work, just coming up to me at a very human level and saying, thank you for sharing that with us. And that's wonderful what you're doing. And I think it proved Andrew right in so much as, again, like in even just taking out the context of it being a health conference, Jack, in this fact that you've got all these, because I think I'll come to another point in that in a minute, but again, we live in a world today in the digital age where it dehumanizes a lot of things, if you know what I mean. And I think it just proved to me that what I do, the act of being vulnerable, it doesn't just help me, it helps other people as well. It gives other people permission to open up about things. So yeah, and I'm not going to name drop people and some of the things that they shared with me, but suffice it to say, again, if you consider there were some really senior people or people in that audience who may normally be quite closed about some of these things, instantly opened up to me around like, oh yeah, I lost one of my parents when I was 9 years old, and the relationship that I've since had with my dad as a result of, like, through golf, us playing together since I lost my mum and stuff, like those kind of very human stories was really powerful. Maybe one of the other things I'll say is one of the sessions I enjoyed the most, which I mentioned to you before I went, was from Aston Ward, who, he works as part of like the kind of strategy and communications team at Golf and Health Project, which is funded by the RNA, I think. And he gave this talk to the audience, which was, and again, I mentioned in the Substack, which is around not using clinical language when we try and sell the health and well-being benefits to the general public about golf. And some of the slides he had were brilliant. It was like the one that I put in the Substack was, rather than say to people, golf reduces all-cause mortality, how about you say to people, golf makes you live for 5 years longer? And I just find that really interesting. And other speakers as well, right? There was a guy from the RNA John Kemp, who spoke just before me, I'll give him a call out. He gave a really nice presentation around sustainability in golf. And again, part of that was around think about all these beautiful green spaces and the nature and the wildlife that live on golf courses and stuff like that. He had this thing inserted into his presentation, which was around, it was a call to action or a question to the audience, which was, what is your first ever golf memory? And his point being that, as other people made that point at the Congress, was we don't get emotional enough about golf. Like, so much of the content that we see in golf is just, I've said it before, is like talking about the technical side of the game, or even in that environment, it's like strength and conditioning or whatever else. But we don't tug on the heartstrings and say, what does golf mean to you? So I loved that. And I definitely found some more of my people there. And like I said at the top of this recording, it has, as I hoped it would, unearthed an absolute treasure trove of future guests for this podcast. So more on that shall be revealed. But yeah,
That's wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. It's so exciting to hear the work that's being done at this macro level around something that you're focused on, you know? And I think that all I was thinking about when you were kind of describing some of those stories or those different panels and the slide that the guy put up about, say it in this different way, is when you say a health conference, right? That doesn't sound like a place that you or I would probably ever go to, right? That
Mm,
sounds like a
mm,
place that somebody who's a doctor or somebody who's in the medicinal field would attend and learn best practices about whatever the topic is. I think what's interesting is, if you pull on that thread a little bit, what is a health conference really about? Well, a health conference is about human beings. It's about making human beings healthier. It's about the care and compassion and the desire to see our, brethren live a healthier life. And that comes from a very fundamentally human place for people to understand that. So um, I think it is so important to translate the language of a dry, health related study or textbook and turn it into actionable, understandable, digestible language for, the everyday audience to consume and understand. This is why golf is a healthy enterprise for me to get into. And I almost look at your role in the capacity with GYH as being a little bit of that conduit between, you're somebody who can go consume the research papers, have these conversations with these people who are doing all these kind of tests and putting all this information out and then translating it to your audience to say, this is what it means for you, right? And this is how you can
mm.
actually and tell those human interest stories that relate to that. So I think it's a wonderful place for you to be and a very important place for you to be to turn a health conference into a human conference, essentially. It
Yeah,
sounds like that's a little bit of what you get out of it.
definitely. And just to build on a couple of the points you made there, one in particular is so you're exactly right in everything you've just said there. And actually the venue for the conference was the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. I mean, that so if I didn't know this already, or if you didn't know it, or if people out there didn't realize this already, the profession of surgery and being a surgeon is highly revered. And you walk around the building and there's like portraits from like the 19th, even 18th century and stuff of like, pioneers who discovered anesthetic and stuff like that. And I'm like, what am I doing here? You know? So, but, really, it was inspiring in its own way, right? But on the other hand, yeah, like you say, so this leads me to a point, which was on the Monday night, I did attend the dinner that they had. And actually, this is really important because it's going to bring me into bringing up a subject which came up. Someone at my dinner table said something that really jarred with me. And I thought, I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I'll bring it up in just a second. But there's a drinks reception before you get sat at your table. And I got speaking to a guy who is a doctor in training. So he's in like his final year at college, at university now or whatever. And, he was frightfully well educated. Okay. And he said to me, yeah, I just didn't appreciate or realize that golf did that for people. Or, he'd heard my speech, I think, and some others. And essentially, there were echoes of or a vibe coming off of what he said to me, which it's no criticism, it's just an observation of what I heard. And he was very open about it, to be fair to him, which was he almost feels disconnected from the human story in a way, which is like he's so engrossed in the textbook stuff that when he valued the opportunity to hear from the horse's mouth, if you like, what golf does for people, so I think what came out of that for me was it proved Professor Andrew Murray right. And it's so great that there are people like Professor Andrew who actually are able to kind of straddle those two worlds actually and realize, like, be able to think in both ways, but realize the importance of having a diversity of thought around the table of people that are in that, because otherwise it becomes an echo chamber, right? Yeah. The one thing I was going to bring up so I mentioned to you, the listener, before I attended, that Stephen Gallagher, who is a former Ryder Cup player, played in the 2014 Europe team at Glen Eagles, won 4 times in the DP World Tour, Scottish golfer, all-round nice guy, came across really well, and his he did a sort of an after-dinner. Well, I wouldn't say it was an after-dinner speech in the traditional sense of, like, he gets up and he's delivering his own address or keynote. It was compared and interviewed by Professor Andrew Murray, and he spoke about his foundation, the Stephen Gallagher Foundation, amongst other things, and talked about how he is, in many similar ways to what you do in Knudsen, Jack, is bringing golf to the younger generation, trying to break down barriers to entry, etc. And he spoke about it he was very particular about saying that he's not necessarily trying to create the next Rory Mcilroy from the kids that he's bringing into golf. He's doing it for the benefit of the community, for society at large, health and well-being, life skills, giving kids a step up in life, etc. Okay? And there was a person at my dinner table who, after he gave that speech, said she couldn't get her head around this idea of, it was almost like mass participation, everyone's a winner type thing, but there was no pathway for elite talent coming out of what Stephen Gallagher was doing. And it just blew me away a little bit, because I was like, I kind of not argued back with her, but I said, well, I mean, for one, he said that's not what he's about. That's not his mission statement. But two, why do we need to obsess about elite performance all the time? The two things can coexist and or be separate. So I wondered, does that make sense? And if so, do you have a perspective around that?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because I do think that's something that we work on a lot, and all the stuff that we try to do is, first and foremost, we want to provide a platform and an opportunity. Do you want to, here's a accessible way to engage with the game and grow your relationship with it. We also talk a lot about what is the pathway that we can help create to cultivate your interest further, if you want to take it beyond the first tee clinics that we do, which is just that, right? So she's probably referring somewhat to that process. And, you know, in most fields in life, there are ways that people can separate themselves if they're showing an extreme interest in something and going down a different path. However, I think if I was sat at that dinner table, the thing that I would say is that, that there's, commonalities amongst elite talent, right? And I would say one of the biggest shared traits or characteristics that elite individuals have in their respective fields is self-determination, right? So if you are somebody who has been a part of the Stephen Gallagher Foundation, you've been exposed to the game, you're showing an interest into the game, the responsibility kind of falls on you at that point to go say, I would like to go follow an elite path. Let me go figure out what that means. Stephen can't be all things to all people, right? He can't have this massive, wide entry point and then a narrow funnel for people to come out of it. I'm sure you can help point them in the right direction, but that would be too dissonant sort of characteristics of his operation. So I think it's a little bit of, not to say, you're throwing them out into the wilderness and say, you kind of go figure it out for yourself. But if you're going to be an elite talent, you have to have a little bit of that within you to go discover it. And what can help you do that? And it's probably not going to be through the same pathway that is introducing people to the game in the very first part.
Yeah. So I said to her that, to be fair, I could actually understand the perspective. At first, it kind of it came across to me a little bit like, is this another example where in golf there's almost this elitist attitude, which is unless you're in it to win it kind of thing, and like you're gonna aspire to play at like a sort of a college or county or national level, why do you even bother in the first place? It kind of felt like it played into this again. And I hate this narrative, by the way, but people talking about like the snowflake generation and stuff of being like, even if you finish ninth, you're still a winner, sort of thing, So I kind of can understand that school of thought, okay, and I respect it in its own way. But actually, she made me think of this example where you were saying there that Stephen Gallagher can't necessarily be all things to all people. Paul Laurie has a golf academy in Aberdeen. I've been to it a number of times before. Great setup, everything like short course, driving range. He's got all the facilities, and he's got PGA pros working for him, and he caters for it all, right? So he's basically got like kind of those initiatives that sheep dip young people or any adult or whoever in golf, and do what you want with it. But equally, he has, because he's got skin in the game and he himself is a major winner and he's got, that elite experience, he has graduated people from his academy onto the DP World Tour, and, who have been like the sort of the winning low amateur at the Open and stuff like that, right? So, but again, I think it's perfectly fine if that's what Stephen is doing. That's kind of where it may or may not lead to, essentially. So, yeah.
Almost like why, that he's created this wonderful, I don't know if you have the same terminology in schooling, but kindergarten is kind of the class before first grade,
Yeah.
4 or 5 year olds will go to. And it's kind of like she's asking, what's the pathway to Harvard from kindergarten? Well, there's
Yes.
a lot of like steps in between, but everyone who's gotten to Harvard most likely has started at kindergarten, right? Where
Yeah.
we have to create this atmosphere of openness and welcoming to really get that joy of the game, and then you can kind of figure it out from there.
Well, so actually, just a final thing I'll share on this before we move on to our Masters segment is, I said to you last time around that I've been working from this wellbeing work hub at this park near me, and I'd met a guy who listens to the podcast and,
You're famous.
play. Well, yeah, I'm only famous because I've basically been back, like as you say, word of mouth. You got self promotion is an important thing, but so that's how he knows of me, because I've been basically telling everyone who would listen that works there. It's sort of, oh hi, yeah, do you know I've got a golf podcast? They're not even making eye contact with me. I'm just like, oh hi there. So anyway, this happened again today, but I was quite fortuitous, or kind of like, just so happened to walk in there, and there was a guy, the only other person in the work hub today, who had his branded t-shirt on showing me that he worked in sport development for the local council. And we got chatting. I told him what I do and asked him about golf and if they're involved in that, and he knew of the community golf instructor program and said, yeah, we so he's responsible basically in the local area for getting 3 to 12-year-olds into sport, essentially, and said that they as an organization are really up for getting kids into golf and would be very open to me doing some work with them, more in the less GYH necessarily, maybe more using my CGI qualification. But again, coming back to this point around pathways, so interesting, because he said he and his colleagues know, because they've had conversation with the local governing, but the Wales Golf before, and the PGA and whoever else, which basically says if you're going to run like a 6-week introductory program in a school to young kids to get them into golf, there should be, or needs to be, a pathway at the end of it to graduate them into a golf club. The problem you've got with that in this rural part of Wales is, and an underprivileged part of Wales where there's very little disposable income and golf's not the cheapest sport to play, there is one golf club in that vicinity, one. And they've met with them, and they were met with a bit of a lukewarm at best response to juniors, kids, nah, you're all right kind of thing, So there is no pathway. If you even try, the worry is that they would fall off the conveyor belt as soon as the 6-week program is done. And it just got me to thinking, there has to be another way. So then I said to him as well, and going back to that it was actually when I was having that conversation with that guy earlier, Jack, that I emailed you that research link, because I was showing him it, and I said the PGA even now, to be fair to them, are thinking about golf in more expansive terms. That research says that we should consider people that play crazy golf and knock putts into a dinosaur's mouth as golfers, essentially. People that play in golf sims are golfers. So I said, did you know that there's a golf sim that's just opened up about 5 minutes up the road from here? And he was like, oh, yeah, I did know about that. And I said, well, think about this young generation. I know on the one hand that we want to get them off their PlayStations and their Xboxes, but wouldn't they love a gamified version of golf? Like, why can't we? There's a driving range right here at this place that we're sat having this conversation at now. Why can't we start them there, build them up, and then, because I said, the minute that you get those kids to a place where they're ready to graduate, truly ready to graduate to an 18-hole golf course, go back to that golf club, the one and only golf club in the region, then they'll take you seriously, because you've got a ready oven-made group of 10 kids who have a $5,000 to $10,000 tag on their head because they're ready to become full members. So let's not give up before we've even, going back to my point on why do we have to obsess about like, I know you and I have talked about this before, but I'm passionate about this, and I'd love to see there being an opportunity rather than us kind of go, right, well, if after 6 weeks you're not going to be able to graduate them to an 18-hole golf course, then you might as well not bother. That's unrealistic from the get-go. So anyway, I don't know. What do you think?
100%. I'm incredibly passionate about it as well. I think those pathways, those stepping stones along the pathway are so key. And a little bit, I don't want to do them down, but a little bit shame on that club, right? For not being
Oh,
willing
big time.
to engage a little bit more in a constructive conversation around, okay, well, if this doesn't fit what you're looking for, how can we help them achieve that, right? And really good on you for suggesting these alternative pathways. And I think you definitely should consider people who play simulator golf. We've talked about this before with pitch, right? Or people who play any sort of golf as golfers. You should take them all seriously and provide them with the opportunity to expand that interest into a more traditional golf setting. So I think more and more there's these opportunities that are popping up and these resources that are being created, like short courses, like indoor facilities, like mini putting experiences, whatever, that can help foster that growth and get somebody from point A to point Z along that journey. And I think it's all on all of us who love this game so much to help, push that conversation forward and help those kids.
Definitely. Well, watch this space. Let's see how it goes. If an outcome to it in the short term could be that I'm able to help them and actually put my qualification into practice now, because like I said to you before, it's currently at the moment sat gathering dust on a shelf, and I hate that. I want to. The whole reason I invested a bit of money in getting that qualification was so that I could use it. And that's what I'm all about at GYH, isn't it? About getting people into golf and helping them fall in love with the game and get all the health and well-being benefits from it. So if or when that time comes, Jack, you and I need to have a chat about what I'm letting myself in for, because part of it scares me in terms of like, how do I handle unruly children and the ones that are like the dissenting ones, the naughty ones in the class, So
Yeah.
anyway, we'll get.
I think that the kind of bow to tie around it is a lot of this is a resource conversation. It's a resource about people's time, people commitment, but
Exactly.
also a financial resource into how are we helping to provide this platform. And I think the work that you're doing with GYH and attending the conference that you attended, I like to think of where are we pulling assets and resources from, right? And there are governmental programs or initiatives that are around we are spending money or providing resources for things that make people healthier, right? And if you're able to tangibly show that golf is something that can provide a huge wellness benefit to the community, maybe those are resources that you can start pulling in that can help provide that pathway program that says it's just as important as having, psychologists on staff at schools or counselors available. Having an outlet like golf can be as beneficial from a health standpoint, and therefore resources should be allocated towards that. So it's a long game, right? It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Exactly.
But you've done
Exactly.
work in that regard, as are everybody else who was at that conference.
Amen. So let's round this out on a dinner, nutrition, food related theme. And it's quite interesting because as soon as we're done, I'll probably need to go and cook the dinner for me and my family. But the healthiest Masters Champions Dinner ever. So like we said, this podcast is being recorded on Wednesday, 9th of April, on the eve of the Masters taking place. I do realise as I'm even talking here, Jack, I'm probably holding you back from watching the par 3 contest. If you even do you watch it normally?
Yeah, I'll tune in.
On ESPN, I think it's
I'll
on.
watch. I mean, if it's Masters, I'm watching it. I
Yeah,
watch
well, whatever. Yeah, exactly.
I don't really care. I'll just put it on.
100%. Right. So, Jack, again, there are some folks who listen to this podcast who are a bit newer to golf. For those that don't know or are unfamiliar, Jack, would you like to tell us what is the Masters Champions Dinner, or what's the essence of it?
Sure. So I think I stumbled upon the origin story of it recently, where Mr. Ben Hogan wrote a letter to the chairman of Augusta in the 1950s and said, I would like to host a dinner that we would have the past Masters champions attend. I hope you can make it. Please wear your green jacket. And that was kind of it from the start. And then ever since then, it's been this really beautiful annual moment where past champions of this illustrious tournament are able to get together and come to the table and really celebrate all of their, shared success, but most specifically the most recent champion from the past year who's able to put together a special meal for the evening that is representative of who they are as a person, where they're from, different familial influences, and stuff like that's kind of themselves on a plate and an evening. So it's a really special night. It's the Tuesday of Masters Week every year, and the pictures that come out of it are amazing because you're seeing generations and generations of great players across the years get together for this one evening. So what a room to be in, and what conversation must take place in there.
So that's a great summary, and like you say, what jumps out to me so much is the fact that and I'll put a link in the show notes because I shared with you an article which the listener can see and read on the Substack as well, which is the basically going through the years back to the 1980s, like what has been served by the different champions over the years. And there are some absolute crackers in here. I mean, like you say, the personality. One that jumps off the page straight away is my fellow Scotsman, Sandy Lyle, back in 9, served up haggis, neeps and tatties. Legend. What a legend. I honestly wonder, has haggis ever been served up at the Masters? And
Probably not.
it has, clearly.
Oh, yeah, now. Before that, no.
Well, do you know, actually, though, I reckon if Robert McIntyre were to win this year, which I hope he does, I'm not sure he will, but let's imagine he did. I don't think he wanted to serve haggis next year. I doubt he would be able to. And I'll tell you why, because the last I checked, it was basically you couldn't import haggis to the US or because it's basically made of like sheep's intestines and all sorts of what on the surface might seem like undesirable offcuts, but it's delicious. Jack, don't let anyone tell you any
Can I
differently.
just say that I somehow have the feeling that the leadership committee at Augusta National would be able to figure out a way of circumventing international trade rules.
I bet you they would. I bet you they would. But anyway, I'm going to say, right, okay, so here's the question. All right. So I'm going to put this directly to the listener. I've done my research here, Jack, and the I asked the question of ChatGPT. I was like, what's the healthiest dinner that's ever been served at the Masters Champions Dinner? And ChatGPT tried to tell me that it was in 2014. So to be fair, it did say this dinner is less known about nutrition first. It's more about nostalgia and the personality of the golfer. However, Adam Scott served in 2014 artichoke and arugula salad with calamari, plus other things like spinach and mashed potatoes, wagyu beef with lobster. And I thought, yeah, okay. He served up a pavlova for dessert, which I had pavlova the other day. It's got a lot of cream in it. So he was doing well until he served that up.
Well, I mean, you got
But
calamari, you got mashed potatoes, pavlova. I mean, we're not. It's not
well,
entirely.
okay, but I think he's been trumped in 2022 by Hideki Matsuyama
Mm.
because Hideki served up all manner of seafood,
Mhm.
sushi, sashimi, and nigiri yakitori, miso glazed black cod. I mean, there's a lot of omega-3 in there. I'll tell you that for nothing. Um, and so maybe putting the health to one side. If I said to you, Jack, right, like here's your two options. Here's your Adam Scott menu, or here's your Hideki menu. Which are you choosing?
I'm definitely going Hideki, and I've heard numerous stories of players on tour say that he is the most sought after dinner companion when they go, especially when they would come to LA for the Genesis, right? Because there's such great sushi, so many great sushi restaurants in LA that if you go with Hideki and you go with his whole crew, the way that they order for the table and this, the kind of private room that they get and everything, it's a whole entire experience. So I would definitely go that route. But I wanted to throw another one at you because as we were talking, I kind of did my own little quick research. So one of the stories that immediately came to mind, and I'm so interested in like having them reflect their story, right? These meals. So Hideki's a great example, especially with his Japanese heritage. But one of my favorites of all time was Vijay Singh. And what they said about Vijay Singh being the big Fijian, right, is that he actually brought a chef from Fiji with him to the dinner to cook the meal. So I'm just going to read you some of the items from the menu here.
Mm.
First of all, neither you nor I drink, but I do have a general awareness of wine. And he did serve in 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, which I know is probably one of the greatest bottles of wine of all time. So he's got that going for him. But seafood tom kha, fresh shrimp, sea scallops, coconut lemongrass soup, chicken panang curry, baked sea scallops, rack of lamb with yellow curry sauce, baked filet Chilean sea bass with three flavor chili sauce, sauteed mixed fresh vegetables, steamed jasmine rice. Also had broiled fresh grouper, filet mignon with béarnaise sauce, not the healthiest, a broiled chicken, and then I can never pronounce this word, lychee sorbet. So for me, that's bright, fresh, healthy, but also, going to his roots with that. So if I had to pick one meal to sit in on, I think that would be that one. And I love
I
VJ.
love
He's a
I
fascinating.
love that. Okay, for just a second, that's clearly one of the best for the reasons that you've just given. One of the worst, if not the worst, was Nick Faldo in 1997, fish and chips and tomato soup. Get out of here! Take his green jacket off him now. Like that's just outrageous. Like I mean, of all the okay, yes, that's stereotypically British or English or whatever, but that's embarrassing.
Put some
Like
thought.
I would have, huh?
Put some thought into it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Come on.
I think you can see some of these people who happen to be more one dimensional. Where they don't have that broad spectrum of stuff.
I mean, coming back to Vijay Singh, right? His former caddy, he had a Scottish caddy. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Called his name was, I just looked it up, Dave Rennick, and he died about 9 years ago now. But apparently, he famously used to. So, see, he I think was for like a long time was VJ's caddy, dedicated caddy, and he basically Dave Rennick said he was a nightmare to work for.
Oh, yeah.
But on the basis that he was an absolute perfectionist. Like he was like a range grinder. He would hit more balls than anyone else. But like he was great to work for on the one hand because he demanded the best from himself and therefore set the standards for his caddy and for everyone else. But he worked your ass off and like got his pound of flesh out of you, basically. So
Yeah.
I think there's a reflection of his style and his personality in the dinner that he served, because everything is like of the highest order, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of dinners, I'm gonna go and rustle up something now. Maybe a chicken dish, like a chicken teriyaki something, or a Thai green curry.
Lovely.
Until the next time, folks, always embrace the rough, cherish the fairway, and cherish the Masters. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Wonderful time to be alive and a wonderful tournament to watch. So until the next time, folks, see you soon.